There are several variables that distinguish a leader. He or she stands on his convictions. He speaks the truth even when it's not popular. And he speaks the truth in love. He is wise, discerning, and not afraid to take risks. And when he sees a window of opportunity, he takes it. Just 4 days after the election, on the same day that Joe Biden was unofficially heralded through the streets as the new president, Dutch Sheets started a daily devotional series called Give Him 15. This 10 to 20 minute daily devotional, which has been accessible both in video and written form, began to challenge the narrative of the news giants with heaven's perspective. Each day, Dutch would share recent dreams or prophecies from various individuals and make connections to the biblical values and principles of our founding fathers, as well as lessons from our history that we could use to discern the present days. Dutch kept that daily devotional going through November, into the new year, through the inauguration, and still continues today. In an hour when the American prophetic and apostolic community needed a general to take a stand, Dutch Sheets paralleled in the spirit what General Michael Flynn was doing in the natural. He was leading. If my math is right, Dutch's devotionals have now gained more than 20 million views. Because of the weight of the prophetic significance his videos offer, and because Dutch played such a vitally important role in leading the prophetic charge, I have devoted 2 whole videos to capturing some of the highlights. But by highlights, I mean I haven't even seen 80% of his videos. I'd say the content of his videos could fill a 40 video series in themselves, but considering they are now close to 200 videos strong, I think it's safe to say they already have. We start on day 1, November 7th, 2020, with the dream Dutch shared by Gina Gholston. Actually, we start where the first video series left off. I kind of marvel at this now, but for anyone who saw the original 17 video What is God's Agenda for America series, I ended the 17th and final video, which I released just 5 days before this first devotional of Dutch's, with his exact same dream. In fact, at the time, I didn't know Gina's name, so I just referred to her as a friend of Dutch Sheets. In the dream, Donald Trump was walking along a bank of a small river. At first, it looked like he was pacing back and forth, searching, when just as he turned to walk away, he saw a wooden crate bobbing out of the water. There were several people lying at the bottom of the water who had been holding the box, but had lost their grip as it rushed to the surface of the water with a splash. Looking to see what caused the splash, Donald Trump pulled out the crate and used his knife to open the lid. Inside were an old Bible, the Appeal to Heaven flag, and communion elements. The president then took the flag, draped it around his shoulders, and knelt with his right knee on the ground, putting the Bible under his left forearm, took the wine and the bread, and then with tears flowing, he began to pray. Finally, he looked down at the Bible and communion elements and said, "This is it. This is what I came here to find." Suddenly, a giant slingshot appeared, which then launched him and all the elements in the box. The people in the water tried to grab him, but it was too late. He then landed perfectly on the steps of the stage at the Capitol building, where he was about to give a second inaugural address. He wrapped the flag around his shoulders, with the Bible in hand, the same Bible his mother gave him from the Welsh revival, and with tears said, "God has taken us back and given us a new start. Now we are rightly focused. We are getting back on track." Then he led the nation through a prayer of repentance, took the communion elements, and led the nation in communion. Now you might say, "I got news for you, bucko. I saw the inauguration. That didn't happen." No, not yet it didn't. Of course, Trump also didn't fling from a slingshot onto the Capitol steps. Dreams tend to be more metaphorical than literal, so hold that thought in the back of your head and let's keep digging. On day 2, November 8th, Dutch sighted 2 of his close friends and his brother, Tim, from the Reset gathering on October 8th through 10th, 2020, just 1 month before the election. Jane Hamon said, "I heard the Lord say in Isaiah 30-31, 'The voice of the Lord will shatter the enemy. The Spirit of the Lord says, I am deploying you in this day and hour. The angels too will be deployed as I send them.'" Tim Sheets added, "I heard bones crack." He said, "I'm snapping the ecclesia. God's governing body on the earth, into alignment with my purpose and my plan across the United States and around the world. Like Ezekiel's bones, they are rising. The wind of God is going to hit, and the anointing of breakthrough is coming to set this world back into alignment with the plan of Almighty God. Finally, Chuck Pierce gave this prophetic perspective. An army that has been reserved will now begin to move. We are going to begin to hear of armies on the move. The intensity of the movement over the next 3 months and 10 days, a time period, by the way, that ended January 18th, 2021, will be something we must get our feet planted for. Paul said, when you feel like you can't stand anymore, you need to keep standing. God showed me in 1986 what would happen in 2020 with China and with this nation. But there is something right now where God is creating a movement that is greater than we understand. And it's a movement that will jar nations and cause nations to say, we must find the root of our faith. You move, and I will reposition armies throughout the earth. Let's start with Chuck. Now, it's hard to tell whether he's talking about spiritual armies or actual military armies. He seems to be referring to military armies, but then he says, we need to keep standing, as in standing in faith and prayer. There seems to be a parallel he's creating whereby physical armies would move as his church moves in prayer. Tim reiterates that when he makes reference to Ezekiel 37, where God commands Ezekiel to prophesy over the dry bones and bring an army to its feet. Finally, Jane says the voice of the Lord will shatter the enemy. All three words seem to represent the same idea, that as God is moving on the earth, behind the scenes, breaking through the enemy's gates, he is establishing a spiritual army that is reinforcing the victory by their determinate stand on prophetic decrees. Prophets are God's mouthpiece, but we, the church, are then called to take those marching orders into prayer and call God's will into the earth. You will see this theme develop from beginning to end of the series. On day 3, November 10th, Dutch referred back to Chuck Pierce again, as well as a dream by Rebecca Greenwood. Referring back to October 10th, 2020, Chuck Pierce said, "Behold, I do a new thing." This phrase speaks of reset to me. In the midst of Israel's captivity, God had a plan to do a new thing. I believe we are in a place where God says, I am activating my plan to do a new thing in America. This is a destiny for this nation that the enemy has tried to pry out of the hands of God's people. However, God is saying, I have a plan. It is critical that your destiny and the destiny of America come forth. This is so much more important than you can even begin to know. I want to take a moment and reflect on these very general, very important ideas Chuck just presented. God is saying through Chuck, I am doing a new thing. You may not perceive it, you may not understand it, because it's new, it's unfamiliar. But I'm asking you to take my words by faith and trust that I know what I'm doing. Chuck says by divine inspiration, I have a plan. It is critical that your destiny and the destiny of America come forth now. This is so much more important than you know. Again, God seems to clearly be saying here, you just need to trust me. There's more going on here than meets the eye. This is about far more than politics, far more than an election. This is about the destiny of this nation. This is about your destiny. This is so much more important than you realize. So I just need you to cooperate with the vision of heaven and pray in accordance to heaven's higher plan. It's also worth tying this back to the dream Veronica West had about the poker game, which I shared in the last video. It was about far more than the poker game between two presidential candidates. They were playing for the destiny of the nation. It's also interesting that before Trump won the hand, he threw his watch onto the mound of gold, a watch that had the word triumph. Before he could win the hand and ultimately win back the destiny of the nation, he first had to throw in the last chip he had left to offer: time. He had to bet the timetable, the countdown to inauguration. He had to let go of control and trust the plan, trusting the prayers of the saints to secure the victory, and trusting the angels to enforce it. Then on November 7th, 2020, Rebecca Greenwood contacted Dutch about a dream she had on September 20th, a dream she said she believed was for now. She begins, the enemy thinks he has secured great victories in this season, but I am the master of the chessboard that the world, man, and Satan has attempted to manipulate through humanism, demonic delay, and antichrist agendas. I have set of moves that Satan and corrupt men will not see coming. They are set of moves that will happen on the game board that will trump evil and corruption. Those moves will secure victory. Remember that even as I hung on the cross, Satan thought he had won. But I secured the keys he had stolen, in a surprise not yet seen before move, arose from the grave and defeated death and hell. Don't think darkness and evil have won. Their defeat and destruction were secured on the cross and sealed by my resurrection life. There will be more subtly surprise moves. I will initiate the final secure move of checkmate on the game board, which the enemy has set in motion among the people and the nations. My ecclesia must rise above the roar of chaos and see, perceive, and discern from my victorious eternal throne room position. She must operate in the victory strategy. The world looks different from the sight of victorious redemption. She said, I saw the U.S. in a vision, and the Lord spoke. Look for the next sun and swift strategic maneuvers. They will come suddenly and swiftly, but with great effectual victory. I saw the sound of intercession, worship, prophetic declarations, including strategic warfare decrees resounding out as sound waves in the spiritual atmosphere. They penetrated and pierced through the canopy and shroud of darkness, evil, lies, and corruption. Glory, light, and justice broke through, shining throughout the land. Now is not the time to be silent. Now is the time for the armed and ready battalion of God's warriors to engage to secure the kingdom order for a new era. It is now time to tip this reset moment into righteous kingdom alignment, time and harvest. On day 5, November 11th, Dutch shared how he was led by 3 dreams to go to the headwaters of the Allegheny River in Potter County, Pennsylvania, to pray in the morning of the election. The first dream he cited was the Gina Gholston dream she shared on day 1. In the second dream, Dutch was now at the headwaters of the Allegheny. If you will remember, in the first dream, President Trump went to the Allegheny headwaters to find something. There, in the second dream, Thomas Paine appeared and gave Dutch a message. Dutch was asked to deliver the message to Washington, D.C. In response to the dream, Dutch said, I believe in part Paine wrote a pamphlet called American Crisis to inspire American citizens to keep fighting for freedom. General George Washington asked its words to be read aloud to encourage his dispirited men on the battlefield, beginning with the infamous words, These are the times that try men's souls. Paine also published Common Sense in 1776, a book considered by many the primary inspiration for the Declaration of Independence, written just months after the book's release and immediate mass circulation. On November 13th, Dutch shared a dream Clay Nash had just 2 nights earlier. In the dream, there were 4 people on the political left spinning 4 plates on sticks on top of their heads. They were mocking and laughing about how they were about to serve the nation a blue plate special. The president told an assistant to get some sharpshooters, including a leader in the prayer movement, and they were positioned to shoot the plates. When the first plate fell, it became red in the shape of the state of Georgia. The second one he shot was North Carolina, and it turned red. The third was Pennsylvania. The fourth was Arizona. Now this is where writing, producing, and releasing this video series really becomes challenging. I revised this video on May 11th. I am now recording it on May 17th. For those of us following, we have seen a light scattering of news drops from Arizona for close to 3 weeks now. We've also started to hear increased rumblings from Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire of all places. The Arizona audit, the first official state election audit, should be complete and released within the next, 3 weeks. If that dam breaks, the flood of patriots already pushing for audits and transparency in their own states will give their state officials no choice but to follow suit. Will the last be first? In Clay's dream, Arizona was the last played, or state to fall. What's intriguing about that dream is that the sum of Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona would push Trump over the 270 electoral votes needed to win the election. Not only would North Carolina's electoral votes not be needed, but by the time Clay had the dream, North Carolina had actually already been determined for Trump. This would seem to indicate that we're talking about more than just electoral votes here. What does it all mean and how would it all play out? I can't say for certain. All I can say is we're beginning to see it in live time. and by the time you hear these words, the story may have already unfolded. Let's continue. One day earlier, on November 12, 2020, a politician told Dutch he needed to gather a team to travel around the nation to pray. Dutch answered back, "That's easier said than done. Things like this take time." The politician responded, "You don't have time." And so, on November 16th, Dutch and his brother Tim Sheets and their good prophetic friend Clay Nash stepped out in faith and led their first prayer meeting in, of all states, Pennsylvania. In the days that followed, leading up to Thanksgiving, the team would continue to conduct prayer meetings in most of the other swing states in contention. The day after, on November 17th, Clay Nash had yet another dream that he relayed later that night in a prayer gathering in Arizona. Note the location. He said, "I had a dream in which Trump's legal team was opening a box that was 2 feet by 2 feet. And within it was another box, and another, and another, and another, until finally all that remained was a much tinier box, now 2 inches by 2 inches. Inside the box was a note and a key. The lawyer, Gina Ellis, then turned to the others and said, 'This is it. We must retrieve the evidence and present the case. They ain't seen nothing yet.' 2 days later, he said he had the same dream, but in this dream, the legal team was more visibly weary. Also, this time, Gina Ellis's words were slightly different. This time she said, 'They have gone before us. We can unload the evidence now.'" Dutch then interpreted the dream, saying the dimensions of the box, 2 by 2 and 2 by 2, represent Isaiah 22:22. "I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David, and what he opens no one can shut, and what he shuts no one can open." Finally, he said the key found in a series of boxes probably represents the differing states they were visiting, and that with each passing prayer gathering, they were getting closer to the key of breakthrough. That dream takes on all the more significance when you consider a vision Charlie Shamp had on February 5th, 2017. In the vision, he said, "I saw a key come down and rest over Washington, D.C., and I saw the address change at the White House to Isaiah 22:22. And the key of the house of David will I lay upon his shoulder, so that he shall open and none shall shut, and he shall shut that none shall open." On day 13, November 19th, Dutch reflected on the prayer meeting in Pennsylvania a few nights earlier. He said the meeting was a follow-up to Dutch's original trip to the headwaters of the Allegheny River on Election Day, and the 3 dreams related to it. Chuck Pierce said to Dutch, "You need to go back to the Allegheny River," and without even a hint of hesitation, Countersport Gospel Tabernacle, right by the headwaters, welcomed them on a 24-hour notice. Chuck Pierce added, "God is breaking down an old structure in this nation and bringing a new one through revelation and the Holy Spirit orchestration." He said this prayer meeting at the headwaters would set a direction for the nation at the crossroads. He saw a line in the spirit between Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C., and concluded, by being there, they would create this line of freedom for America. William Penn once prayed, "Let Pennsylvania be the seat of this nation." And the nation was born in 1776 and 1787 in Philadelphia at Independence Hall. While we see our spiritual covenants established in Cape Henry and Jamestown, we see our governmental covenants established in Pennsylvania. Now, this might be a bit of a stretch to correlate this to a dream James Goll had in 2012, but I saw this theme repeat so many times in the months that would follow that I think it's at least worth holding a town hall meeting and presenting the evidence. Well, more on that later. In the dream, an eagle was flying over the globe before finally zooming in over Southern California and entering Mott Auditorium in Pasadena. Great revivalists from the past, like Amy Semple McPherson and John Wimber, were there, and a 5.7 earthquake released a spiritual awakening. The dream then ended with William Seymour in a pogo stick starting revival fires wherever he went, followed by the words, "A line has been drawn in the sand." My guess is that Mott Auditorium in Pasadena is not a literal birthing spot for revival. It's more a matter of what Mott represents. At that time, Mott was where Harvest Rock Church met, pastored by a team of 5 pastoral couples, including Che Ahn and Lou Engle. Lou had given birth to a stadium prayer movement by the name of the Call, and Che had started Harvest International Ministries, planting churches in dozens of nations around the world. In 1982, Che had a dream that inspired their original move from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. In the dream, a black man came to him and said, "Come to Los Angeles, for there's going to be a great revival." Both Che and James' dreams splintered my brain for months as I created the first God's Agenda series. I pondered, were they two links to the same chain? William Seymour was a black man who fathered the Great Azusa Street Revival. In the dream Che had, it was a black man who told him to come to Los Angeles for a great revival. Why a black man? Was that relevant? Was it a heavenly wink that said, watch the signs? For now, I'm just going to plant the seeds. I'll expand on that more later when the theme resurfaces. Dutch continued, citing a dream Clay Nash had on June 24, 2020. In the dream, Donald Trump, recognizing the dream as the Beloved, as in John the Beloved from the Gospels, had a press conference to ask for intercession concerning a trip he was to take to the headwaters at the Allegheny River. The day he made the trip, the praying church was lined up on both banks to pray. Standing behind the praying church was a cloud of witnesses adding their agreement to the declarations and decrees being made by the praying church. As President Trump traveled upstream in an open boat, Asian carp flew up from the river seeking to strike him. As each carp surfaced, however, the body of faithful prayers declared and decreed protection over the president. The carp were hit with flashes of bright light. He said, "I felt they were angels," and the fish were slammed back beneath the surface of the water. When President Trump reached the headwaters, he began to decree about America completing its course and finishing well. Why Asian carp? Did China play a role in stealing the 2020 election? And is this the symbolic meaning of the dream? And why the Allegheny River? And why is Donald Trump represented as John the Beloved? Alright, the dream marathon is almost done. For now. Finally, on November 20th, 2020, Clay Nash had a related dream. In the dream, Dutch sent the first June 24th dream to intercessors asking for more prayers. Dutch said when he shared the dream with his wife Cece, she felt he needed to actually go to the headwaters, and so Dutch called a few friends to confirm, which they did. Then, en route to Pennsylvania, a friend of his, Gina Gholston again, texted him saying she felt she needed to remind him of a dream she had in July. In the dream, she saw Thomas Paine, and she understood his presence to mean that they needed to persevere to win the war. Then, Thomas Paine threw Dutch a football. When Dutch caught it, he saw written on it the word triumph in silver letters, which he then placed in a nearby stream, which became a river reaching Washington, D.C. In the dream, Dutch sensed something would be released once it arrived. Upon receiving the football in D.C., it arrived as a key, in which she said, "Of course, it's a key." She then picked up the key, and it began to glow. Suddenly her phone dinged, indicating she had a message which read, "I am not late." The scene then changed, and she was on the steps of the U.S. Capitol looking down when she saw the Triumph key again, and it began to glow, and her phone dinged again. This time, in bold cap letters, it read again, "I am not late." Oh yeah, one last thing. In Veronica West's dream about the poker game, what was written across the watch Donald Trump threw on top of the pile of gold? That would be the word triumph. Are you seeing any repeated patterns yet? If not, stay tuned, because we have a long way to go. Our next stop, Jamestown, where it all began, and our Christian roots that grew up from that first tree.